Hi and welcome. At the waterfront gala, Sloane Mercer is trying to disappear into a potted palm when her ex-husband's laughter cuts through the room like a blade. Rowan is with Arian, the woman he kept insisting was just a colleague. And they are smiling at Sloane as if she's a punchline that won't stop telling. It's self-cameras. Swivel waiters hesitate. Misstep. Sloane tastes metal. Then hears a voice she only knows from headlines. Caspian Duval, the billionaire whose name can move markets, saying calmly into a microphone, "M. Mercer is my guest." The room hushes. He doesn't look at Rowan. He only looks at Sloane and claims her. The text arrived on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 21 minutes before Sloane's nonprofit board meeting. She remembers this because the minutes were her job to track, and duty had become her life jacket. She lived on numbered lists. Rent due on the first board meeting on the third Thursday. Grant report by the 10. Pick up kimchi from heart. Before the week. Away from her. The text was from a number labeled Studio Shared, a group chat Rowan had created for his apartment when he needed space to think. You're out of coffee. Again. Babe, a studio shared. Sloane repeated under her breath, the way people read instructions when they already suspect they might be doing something wrong. She'd left Rowan 9 months earlier. After 12 years of being told she was too serious, too intense, too much. She told herself she left because she wanted to paint again, and because she couldn't keep living with a man who treated trust like a business expense. But there is leaving, and there is being pushed. And sometimes you don't know which is which until you see your ex-husband's mistress. Call him babe in the place where your lamp, your rug, your faint lemon smell lived. At the board meeting, Sloane introduced a pilot program for immigrant artists who needed studio space. Her voice steady, her hands composed. The program was the kind of thing she was born for, the small, attention-heavy work of calling 5 landlords, of negotiating rent by offering to organize their hallways, paint their stairwells. The others on the board, retired school teachers and a barista who made zones, nodded along, coloring her idea with their approval. After she went home to her apartment in Capitol Hill, a 1-bedroom with crooked floors and a porthole window that made the rain feel theatrical, she ate instant noodles with a boiled egg and called her brother, Theo. "I'm fine," she told him unprompted. "That means you're not." He said, "What happened?" "Just confirmation. I'm not crazy." "You were never L. She wanted to ask if he'd be willing to come to a fundraiser with her next week, the waterfront gala, where rich people in Navy were meant to be inspired by pictures of children with paint on their cheeks. Nonprofit's director had insisted she attend because Sloane had designed the slide deck and could speak donor. She didn't ask Theo because he was on call at the hospital and because she was 33, too old to bring her little brother to hold her hand. That week she painted late into the night a mess of blues and gray-greens that looked like the sound of an escalator. When you're too tired to climb it, she scrub it out sections with a rag and started again, thinking of the way Rowan used to say, "I'm just being honest," in the same tone other people used for "I love you." Honesty is a blunt instrument, like a candlestick wielded in the dark. On the day of the gala, Sloane wore a black dress with sleeves because she didn't want to worry about her arms. She did her makeup like armor, simple, purposeful, and tied her hair back with a silk ribbon. The venue hovered over Elliott Bay, a white rectangle with windows so clean people walked into them. Inside, the air smelled like cilantro and money. "You're Sloane," a woman said, sliding up to her with a champagne flute in each hand. "I'm Lay, PR freelance. The director told me you're the soul of arts access in this city." Sloane blinked. "The soul." Lay grinned. "Donors like souls. It makes them feel lighter. When their credit cards get heavier, they laughed the way strangers do when they're trying to put each other at ease." Sloane sipped half a Flute too fast and told herself to count to 4 before she swallowed. The slideshow was seated. The director was fluttering near the mayor. Sloane checked her phone. No texts. Then she heard Rowan's laugh. She hadn't realized memory could live in a sound, but there it was. A little breathless surge he saved her when he believed he was the cleverest man in the room. She turned and saw him, sharper, jawline, new suit. But still Rowan, which was worse, beside him. Arian Loach was in a dress that cost as much as a dishwasher. Her hair pinned in a way that suggested it had never misbehaved. They were smiling, their mouths doing a synchronized dip and flash. And Sloane knew their smiles were about her. The stain you can't wash out is not betrayal. It's humiliation. Leigh followed Sloane's stare and made a face. Is that the axe? Yes, and the reason? Leigh squeezed Sloane's elbow. A quick human pressure. You're with me, she said. If they come this way. We are the kind of busy that can't be interrupted. But Rowan didn't come her way. He let the current bring him. Arian looked directly at Sloane, smiled with an artful shade of pity, then said something into Rowan's ear that made him laugh again. Sloane reached for air. What she found instead was a voice, amplified by microphones and good breeding friends. The voice said, smooth as maple syrup, before the program begins, please welcome a guest whose support of open studios in this city is the reason some of these artists have a roof over their heads. Everyone pivoted as one organism on the small stage. In a navy suit that belonged to Designs of Power stood Caspian Duval, billionaire port magnate. The kind of man who had appeared in Sloane's newsfeed often enough to seem like a recurring character on a show she didn't watch. He looked unhurried, like he had never sprinted to a bus in the rain. Miss Mercer, he said. And every head turned again to Sloane. She understood none of this. She understood everything. Because suddenly all she could see was Rowan and Arian seeing her. And it didn't matter that a stranger with a perfect voice had said her name. It mattered that Rowan's mouth had flickered. Ms. Mercer is my guest, Caspian said as if people had been whispering doubts. And I'm proud to call myself a supporter of the program. She's built. He stepped off the stage. Crowd unzipped to let him through. Sloane felt the heat of 1,000 eyes and the Arctic air of one man's attention. He took her hand. Not possessive but definite. Sloane, he said quietly, like he'd used her first name before. Would you trust me for 3 minutes? She did a thing she later told herself was both unforgivable and necessary. She nodded. They sat on stools near the catering station, as if their proximity to shrimp skewers could make this feel less like a scene. Caspian positioned himself so that his broad shoulder became a wall between her and Rowan. Leigh hovered 2 paces away, scanning the crowd with a professional's interest in chaos. I'm sorry for the surprise. Caspian sat up close. He was older than the photo suggested. In the way men become defined more by decision than skin. I recognized you and improvised. Your board director mentioned you'd be here. Sloane's tongue found its place. Again, recognize me. How Caspian's lips did not quite smile. Your mother used to run a corner store on Ranger. What the word lipped out of her. I was a terrible teenager, he said, almost embarrassed. Cut Class tried to sell bootleg DVDs. Mrs. Mercer called me out and gave me a job stocking shelves. She told me to come back when I had learned to stop lying. I came back the next day. Sloane's throat tightened. My mother died when I was 24. I know I sent an arrangement, but it felt like paying a bill with flowers. I've been looking for a way to repay the debt properly. He glanced at Rowan, at the press, at Arian, pretending not to watch. May I say something on your behalf tonight about the program? About your courage. It will put a firewall between you and theatrics. She thought of the text. She thought of why she had left. and why she still sometimes woke with Rowan's sorry in her mouth. Furthermore, she thought of the way my guest had cut the oxygen supply to Arian's look. Then she reminded herself, a gift that arrives on a stage may be hiding instructions in the box. What do you want in return? Sloane asked, because the corner store had been a place where the owner's daughter saw every transaction in its full light. A chance to sponsor your Open Studios initiative, he said, and a chance to appear. He paused, searching for a word that would not bruise human in front of a city that believes I only move ships and numbers. There it is, Sloane said softly. There it is, he agreed. Also, your ex-husband is about to say something cruel. If you let me stand next to you, he will swallow it. Why do you care if he swallows it? Because some men are born allergic to women's humiliation, he said, as if stating a boring fact. I am one of them. And because he is also a founder at Matchbox, yes. He lifted an eyebrow. A company negotiating for port automation contracts with my logistics subsidiary. You know who my ex-husband is? She said, not a question, I know who you are, he corrected. And Sloane felt the line of it, the deliberateness. And I understand how power gets used. Allow me to make it a shield for once. The director announced that children painted themselves into animals. Sloane stood on the stage for her small, careful words about keys and light and rooms that smell like possibility. Caspian stood 2 feet away, not touching her, but near enough that photographers framed them together. When she finished, he offered his palm, and she stepped back to her stool. Arian approached them during the applause. Practice smile in place, Mr. Duval, she said warmly. I'm Arian Loach, we met at. I prefer Caspian, he said without warmth. You work with Matchbox. Consult. Arian corrected. We're thrilled about the RFP with, I'm sure you are. He turned as if Arian were a sound he had already processed. Then he touched Sloane's elbow and asked, walk. Arian's smile crystallized. Rowan arrived at her side late to the rejection. He looked at Sloane and his mouth moved, as if he were asking for something. When he found only air, he laughed soft, private, like a man who had a joke with a friend. Good evening, Rowan, Sloane said, because she had learned that nothing breaks an old habit like naming it. Enjoy, the ordered. They walked, the windows made of evening light. The bay shrugged under a fair's wake, lay trailed behind. Texting someone who would type the word optics. You're not asking for more, are you? Sloane said when they reached the corridor near the restrooms. Beyond money and proximity, it would be useful if for a few public weeks, people assumed you and I are aligned, as in dating, as in aligned. He repeated, careful. And what would that alignment do for your other alignments? Mitigate a narrative that I build without care? He said, our port expansion has activists ready to call me a machine without a face. If I support you, if we are seen supporting each other, it complicates the caricature, and for me, the money your program needs and the chance to make certain people very quiet. And when the weeks end, then we align, he said. Unless we find another arrangement. Sloane thought of women's studies seminars, where they'd warned her about structural inequality. She thought of her mother's hands, dark with dust, putting change into a plastic tray. She thought of how good it felt when his voice slid under her. A foundation that did not tremble. I'll write my terms, she said. You will sign them. We will do this my way or not at all. He nodded once. Good also, she added. Don't ever say claim again. Unless you mean the exact opposite. Tonight was strategic. I understand, but I belong to myself. He held her gaze. Something like relief flickering across his face. Noted the document Sloane emailed the next morning had, subject, Memorandum of Understanding, Studio Access Initiative. The body included 6 points written in plain English. Studied with legal bones. No romantic references. No gestures at Destiny Vale Foundation to commit $1.5 million over 3 years to the Studio Access Initiative. First tranche payable upon signing. PR alignment period, 8 weeks from the date of signing, during which both parties appear at specified public events. No language of romantic exclusivity will be used. Without mutual explicit consent. Boundaries. No touching in public without agreed upon signal. 2 taps on wrist. No surprises. Autonomy. Program decisions remain. Loans. Vail Foundation may advise but not control transparency. Any additional motives and/or conflicts. E.G. Port expansion optics. To be disclosed in writing before signing. Sunset. After 8 weeks the PR alignment ends unless both parties extend. In writing. Caspian replied within an hour. Subject. Agreed, with one amendment. In the document he had added a clause. Protection during alignment period. Any attempt by third parties. E.G. Ms. Mercer's ex-husband or business associates to humiliate or exploit Ms. Mercer shall be met with immediate public pushback from Mr. Duval, including but not limited to a counterstatements. B. Withdrawal of business. Public apology on Ms. Mercer's terms. Sloan stared at the screen until the black text began to ghost. She put on a coat and walked to the Vietnamese bakery. Around the corner, she stood in line behind a man buying 6 Panda waffles and a teenager practicing her apology to her mother. Furthermore, she texted Theo, I'm about to make a deal. He called. Is it with the devil-defying devil? Is he richer than the ocean? Yes. Does he make you feel smaller or larger? Both, she said. Then read your own terms aloud, twice. If you still feel like yourself, sign. Sloan went home and read them aloud. Once to the wall, once to her mother's old picture on the bookshelf. She signed. An hour later a courier arrived with a leather folder and a pen that made a sound she had never heard before. When ink met paper, she signed. Again, Caspian's signature was already there. Clean. ONORNAMENT. Lay came by with a media plan. We'll do a photo at the Pioneer Square studio. You'll talk about how access changes lives. He'll talk about how something changed his. We'll invite only 2 reporters and 1 podcaster who understands nuance. Minimal social. You're not being rolled out. You're being introduced. I'm not a product. Sloan said. Exactly. They met at the studio that smelled like turpentine and possibility. Caspian arrived on time with a thermos and 2 paper cups coffee. He said. My assistant called 3 places. One of them said, you like it slightly sweet. He held up packets of raw sugar, like he was offering a spell. Sloan poured. You do remember my mother. I remember the bell above the door. I remember how it sounded when my pockets were full of stolen things. He seemed to steady himself, and I remember the day she saw through me and didn't kill me for it. They walked past canvases leaning like tired soldiers. A girl with purple hair glanced at them, then did the favor of pretending they were nothing. They stood in front of a painting Sloan had been too scared to finish. Swaths of rain broken by the crisp edge of a window frame, as if Seattle were always on the other side of glass. Why did you leave him? Caspian asked, voice quiet and wronger than curiosity. Because I couldn't stop trying to make myself smaller to fit his forgiveness, she said, the answer arriving like a train. Because he wanted to be applauded for telling me he had slept with someone else while I was writing Grant reports. Because I couldn't breathe without rehearsing what I would say in case he found another floor. And why did you marry him? Because he made the world feel less like homework, she said, smiling at the cruelty of it. Because he used to bring me oranges and peel them the way my father did, with the white pith trailing like ribbon. Because he said I made him better. And I needed to believe someone's improvement could be my work. I hoped to be worse. He said, that is, I hope to improve in ways no woman can claim credit for. Sloane laughed. Unwilling and grateful. That's a line, Di. It's the truth. I had a fiancé once who thought she could civilize me. She left with a dentist in Naples. My teeth have never been so well flossed. Stood in a patch of sun like it had been reserved for them. The photographer, a woman with steady hands, asked them to face each other. Then to face the light. Sloane felt Caspian's presence without letting it yank. Her compass. It felt like standing near a fireplace in a drafty house. Dangerous to forget. Impossible to ignore. When the photos ran in the Sunday paper, the tone was curious, almost tender. Billionaire sponsors, working artists. Through partnership with advocate Sloane Mercer, the podcaster titled the episode, Power, Patronage and Boundaries. All of it made room for Sloane's program to breathe. Applications doubled. A landlord offered 2 floors for less than market. Because my sister's kid is one of yours. Then Rowan texted, you always did know how to perform. Proud of you in a way. Sloane didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded the message to Lay, who forwarded it to Caspian, who texted Sloane, say the word and I'll be petty, she typed, then deleted. Earn it, she typed instead. Not yet. The board asked Sloane to speak at the city council hearing about port expansion. We have to show we're not against growth, the director said, bouncing in a chair too low for his desk. We're for growth. That includes people. Invite the person paying our rent to speak, Sloane said dryly. That will go over great. What if he stands beside you? The director said. Says, we need both jobs and quiet afternoons, where children learn to hold a paintbrush. It sounds like a staged husband and wife campaign for school board, Sloane said. But she agreed because she wanted to test whether Caspian knew the difference between a good look and a good deed. They prepared. Lay coached Sloane to slow her sentences. Pick your verbs early, she said. People use adverbs when they're scared. Don't be scared. Night before the hearing, Sloane went to the corner store that had replaced her mother's. The bell rang. A note one. In off. An auntie she didn't know watched her pick up seaweed, snacks, and a lottery ticket. As if grief had a shopping list at home. Sloane painted, then stopped. Then painted again. She saw her mother's hand in the corner of the canvas. A gesture, really. A smudge shaped like a wish. She washed it out. You can carry 2 knives in your body at once. Anger and love. You can bleed from both and still make breakfast at 6. At the hearing, the chamber was a box of breaths. People wore shirts that said, keep our water safe, and others that jobs. Food. Caspian arrived in a suit the color of compliance. He stood beside Sloane at the podium, letting her set the pace. My name is Sloane Mercer, she said into the microphone that made her vowels sound expensive. I grew up stocking shelves at a store 2 miles from this building. I run a program that gives artists with day jobs a key to a room in this city. Art isn't a synonym for spare time. It is a form of labor and of care. Please don't pass a policy that makes our lives a rounding error. Caspian took the mic. I'm Caspian Duval, he said, as if the room were a backyard barbecue and he was bringing the potato salad. I employ 6,000 people in this region. Furthermore, I believe in the port. Furthermore, I also believe in breathing. The proposed expansion can keep ships moving without moving people out of their homes. If we cannot prove that in writing, don't give it to us. It was not what Sloane expected. That it was both better and slipperier than she wanted. Furthermore, it made enemies who wanted him simpler to hate. Furthermore, it made friends who loved a compromise that tasted like something you could sell after. Outside, a woman with a shaved head handed Sloane a flyer. Beware of philanthropic cover, the woman said. Not unkindly, money is a solvent. It can clean or erase. Sloane folded the paper into quarantine, her pocket like a piece of evidence against herself. Caspian stood beside her. Quiet, until they reached the curb. "You were good," he said. "You didn't ask for mercy. You asked for math. Furthermore, you weren't bad." She admitted. "I strive," he said now, "because I am not a saint. I must go scare a man who wants to treat this region like a chessboard." He looked at her. "I'll text you after. Threats don't count as texts." She said, "Some of us are bilingual." He ducked into a car. Sloane watched it pull away and felt again the now familiar blend of gratitude and suspicion. A cocktail named for adults who refused to be gullible and still loved to be surprised. Her phone buzzed a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "Congrats on the boyfriend. Upgrade drinks." Sloane imagined the slow, oiled click of Aryan satisfaction. She typed back, "Thanks. So happy for you and Rowan. Hope the apartment still smells like my candle." Aryan replied instantly. "It smells like achievement." Sloane didn't reply. She walked to the water and stood where fairies stitched gray to grayer, and she let the wind take some of the heat from her cheeks. Caspian texted after midnight. "Are you awake, Sloane? Unfortunately, Caspian driver can bring you to a place if you want air. No expectation. There's soup." Sloane stared at the words until their edges softened. She typed, "I'll walk." "Caspian, I meant soup." She allowed herself to laugh alone in her apartment. Then she put on a sweater and walked to the late-night Korean spot near the stadiums. She waited for a table and pretended this was a city where a woman could be alone at 1 a.m. without feeling the weight of her own choice. A man slid into the seat opposite her. Not Caspian. "Rowan Sloane," he said softly, rehearsed. "I was driving by." "You were not." She said, "Okay, I wasn't." He looked like the boy she married when she wanted a shortcut to adulthood. "Can we talk?" "We are right now talking. You have 2 minutes." He inhaled. "You never wanted what I wanted," he said. "You wanted small keys and light and rooms where people can become themselves." She said, "Yes. I want small, and I want it everywhere. You wanted something easy to measure." "We failed each other." "I didn't fail you," he said, the old heat coming back to his eyes. "I loved you. You made me feel like I had to ask permission to breathe. You felt that way because you couldn't be honest without wanting a medal," she said calmly. "When you lied, I softened the landing. When you told the truth, you wanted me to clap." He looked away angry. Not at her, but at the mirror. She'd slid across the table. "You think he's your answer," he said, flicking his chin up in the direction of Caspian's name. "I don't think in answers anymore," she said. "Think in terms, and my terms are mine." Aryan appeared then, as if she'd been in the booth behind them, which she almost certainly had times up. She said brightly, "We have an early call." Sloane lifted her menu. "Enjoy the kimchi stew." She said, "It stains outside." Phone buzzed. Caspian drivers at the corner. She stepped into a black car because she was tired and because her judgment was an animal that needed rest. Caspian sat inside. Sleeves rolled to his forearms, a thermos between his knees. Like he'd been hoping it would earn its way into the scene. "You saw them," he said. Not a question. "I saw a rehearsal," she said. "They're laughing a new investor for Matchbox," he said, "a group that wants me out of the port bid by any means that can be described as ethical." In a footnote. "And me?" she asked. "What am I in their footnote?" "The example," he said. "The proof that you're a small-time operator dressing up as a big person's project. Then don't make me a project," she said sharply. He turned to face her. "I'm trying to make you a problem," he said, "for them." The car pulled up to the Bainbridge ferry. "Last run of the night soup?" Caspian asked. "On a boat." "This is unhinged," she said, and then said yes. "On the ferry, the Cafeteria smelled like school lunch and dawn. Caspian poured soup into paper cups. She sipped. It tasted like someone had learned to care in a kitchen with bad lighting. My father left when I was 6. He said so casually she almost missed it. My mother worked at a bottling plant when she was tired. I was a rumor to myself. The day your mother put me behind her counter and said, "We're going to see if you can be trusted." For 1 hour I felt the rumor become a person. Sloane watched the dark interrupt itself along the water. "So I'm your restitution." "You are not." He looked offended in a way she trusted. "I've given away more money than Matchbox will make this year. None of it makes me sleep easily. This is not guilt. This is," he struggled and she allowed herself to see it, "this is how I want to spend the hours I can see, and the ones you can't, those I give to the machines that run my life." The fairy growled. They sat without needing to fill the air. It was the kind of silence that can only be made by people who have both been the loudest person in a room and wish they weren't. They returned to the dock. Sloane's phone blew up. A gossip site had run a headline, "Billionaire's new muse. Ex-wife of startup star," with a photo of Sloane and Caspian at the studio. His head slightly bent toward hers. The comments were a litany of strangers. Confidence. She looked at him. "This is the part where people ask if I'm sleeping with you. They've already asked." He said, "They've answered for us. Furthermore, they prefer their answers." "What's our answer?" "Our answer is, read the terms." He put his hand on the seat between them, open, not touching hers. She looked at it and understood the offered calculus. She could hold it and make everything simpler, which would also make everything unsafe. She looked out the window. "Drive me home," she said. He nodded. "Of course." The next week, a journalist published a story about Matchbox's data practices. It was dry as driftwood and just as dangerous in a flood. It suggested the company used prototype cameras to track workers in ways that violated promises made to the union. Furthermore, it named Rowan as a founder who had minimized employee concerns in internal emails. Sloane did not take pleasure in the story. She took relief in it, the way you take a painkiller after a tooth extraction. The absence of throbbing is not joy. She lost herself in spreadsheets for the studio program. She taught a Tuesday night class where a bus driver painted a portrait of the route he'd driven for 15 years and cried without embarrassment. Arian texted again. "Hope your billionaire has a crisis communications team. You're going to need one too." Sloane ignored her. The program had its first open house with the Vail money. A table of markers that smelled like childhood. A corner for clay that looked like the start of a city. Caspian arrived late and stood at the door, shaking hands with a woman who reminded him of his aunt. He had the sense to be inelegant about it, to make himself smaller in rooms that were not built for him. On Friday, Sloane's lawyer, Isolde, called. "Your divorce settlement includes a clause about Matchbox equity options that vests next quarter," she said. "I assume you know this. I know we put something on a page. I didn't want to look at." Sloane said, "It's worth something." Isolde said gently, "Something significant you could sell when the window opens. But there's a non-disparagement clause attached to early liquidity." Sloane laughed briefly. Unhinged. Rowan wrote himself a clause. "That pays me to be quiet." "That is one way to see it." Isolde said. "Another way is you get paid. Full stop." Sloane went for a walk. She ended up at the sign outside. Her mother's old store, now a vape shop with a neon dragon. She wanted to ask the bell to ring the way it used to. Furthermore, she wanted to tell a teenager who looked like Caspian once did he could be caught and cleaned and kept. That night she went to a dinner she had agreed to months ago. A table of women who had decided not to hate themselves. They ate oysters and told the truth. One of them, a therapist, said, "Shame is a leash you put on yourself because you think dogs don't bite if they see one." Sloane wrote it on a napkin and put the napkin in her wallet. When she got home, a car idled outside her building, Rowan in the driver's seat. Hands at 10 and 2 like a man learning. She approached because she was tired of being the person who crossed the street to avoid exactness. "Why are you here?" she asked. He looked up. Tears lived in the lower lids of his eyes, the way water stands in a cup. "They're going to use me," he said. "The board, they need a scapegoat. The cameras." Arian pushed it, "But they will say it was me. I'm not your priest." Sloane said, "I know," he said, sobbing once. "But you're the person who knows where the softest part of me is. Please say something about me in the press. Say I'm not a monster. That's what you want." Her voice a whisper now, because the request had reached a pitch only human ears could hear. "You want me to launder your story with my body?" He flinched. "I want you to tell the truth. Here's the truth," she said, heat rising. "You wanted a wife who would make you impossible to hurt. I can't. I don't want to, and I won't build you a cross to climb onto and call it mercy." He wiped his face raggedly. "You're cruel," he said. "So are you," she said. "But I went first." He left. She went upstairs and sat on the floor and laughed because she had not died. Then she cried because not dying is so often the only victory. You get her phone vibrated. "Caspian, are you safe, Sloane?" "Yes, Caspian. Lies are expensive. I had to threaten to pull a contract from a vendor to keep a story from inventing us." Sloane: "You did that for me, Caspian. For me too, but also you." Sloane: "Stop acting like you can fix the ocean with a straw." Caspian: "A metal straw, at least." She went to the window and watched the streetlights fume. Somewhere out there, a man in a suit was teaching himself how to tell the truth because a girl at a counter had told him to try. 2 days later, a leak, an internal memo from Vale Logistics recommending an acceleration of the port bid, despite community sensitivity. The memo had Caspian's initial at the top. The activist with the shaved head posted it with a caption, "Here's your human face. Watch it bite." Sloane read the memo twice. The language was bloodless and obedient. It was, in its way, the opposite of a lie. It was a truth that had chosen to dress itself in a lab coat. She called. "Caspian, what is this?" "An old memo," he said, sounding more tired than she had heard him before we met. "Before the hearing. It shouldn't have left the room. It shouldn't have been written like that. I failed to be as complicated on paper as I am in person. That's convenient." She said. "It's also true," he said. She wanted to throw the phone. She wanted to put the phone in a drawer and fill the drawer with salt. "Do you know what it looks like from here?" she asked. "It looks like you're using me." "That we're using each other. We are," he said quietly. "But I meant it when I said I wanted to be better in ways no woman could own. This memo is the worst version of me. I'm working on killing him. People will say I'm a fool." She whispered. "They may be right," he said. "But they may also be wrong about why. Come to the studio." She said. "Not for cameras, for me. If we're going to end this, I want to hear it in the room where I built. The only thing I trust." He came. The room was a suspicion of paint and light. They stood like they had the first time, like a pair of people who didn't know whether to hand each other a weapon or a glass of water. "I can't be your cover," she said. "Not even if the cover makes a different story possible. You're not my cover." He said. "You're my peer." "Then act like it," she said. "Shut down the bid until the impact. Statements are written in a language my auntie can read." He stared at her like men do when they haven't yet accepted that you are not asking for permission, but announcing a condition. Then something in his face moved. He nodded. I single quotes LL. "Call a press conference," he said. "I'll say I was wrong to move fast, and I'll slow down. They'll call me weak. I'll use my weakness as a front door and my power as a lock. And me. Stand next to me or don't. I won't use your name." She paused. I will stand next to you. She said, but if you falter, I'll step away. And I won't warn you first. Good, he said. They held each other's eyes as if they were reading a contract in small print. Then he reached out and touched her wrist. 2 taps. She nodded. He took her hand for a moment that lasted as long as it needed to. Press conference was held in a room that made microphones feel like weapons. Caspian spoke plainly. He apologized without grafting a hero story to the apology. He announced a pause and invited union reps and neighborhood leaders to sit at a table with his team and write a plan in public. When it was Sloane's turn, she said, I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be a citizen. Symbols are useful when people need shortcuts. I'm not interested in speed. Then she stepped away from the podium and stood alone. A choice she made because she wanted the picture to show space between them. That night her phone filled with both thanks and derision. They activist with the shaved head wrote, You're still in the room. That's something. Don't forget where the exits are. Sloane slept the way a person sleeps after a long drive, heart-humming legs, remembering the pedals. The alignment period ended on a Tuesday that smelled like the first rain after a hot day. The terms said they would align unless both extended. Sloane sent Caspian an email. Thank you for honoring my terms. The program can now meet its rent for the next 3 years. That's not a small thing, he replied. Thank you for allowing me to be more than the worst memo I ever signed. Lay sent a basket with a card. You did nuance on the internet. Rare is Sauter sent a link to a financial portal. Your options vest Friday. Decide with eyes open. Sloane took the ferry alone to think. She stood at the bow and let the spray make a map on her face. She thought about money and mouths and how power is not a single ladder, but a room full of them, some made of rope. Some of the words. When she returned to the dock, a man stood waiting, Rowan, because some stories do not end without revisiting the scene of the humiliation. With new clothes on. I'm leaving Matchbox, he said in a voice trying to be clean. They wrote me the letter. I signed it. I'm sorry. She said and meant it for the boy with the oranges and for the man who had forgotten how to bow his head. They want us to be enemies. He said, It's easier to sell if we hate each other. We don't have to give them a story. She said. He nodded. I read your terms. He said, how? She asked, startled. They leaked. Everything leaks. He stared past her at the water. Wanted you to write terms for me too. I kept trying to make you my instructions. Furthermore, I don't have a manual for you. She said gently, but I can tell you one thing. Stop using apologies like a thread. You expect me to pull. He laughed ragged. I'm going to go live with my sister in Spokane. Good. She said, The light's different there. Maybe it will show you a kinder angle. He opened his mouth to say a word she knew by its shape. She shook her head. Don't, she said. Let's leave some words unused between us. Let's keep them as a gift. He nodded and walked away. She watched him become smaller and refused to feel victorious. She let herself feel relieved and sad. Too. Knives wrapped in the same cloth, Caspian called that night. How is the light? He asked. Different. She said, Do you miss the alignment? I miss being allowed to pay attention to you in public, he said. In private, I intend to continue. You can intend, she said. May I take you to dinner? He asked. As a man who has signed no terms other than the ones where we look at each other and listen. Yes, she said, but you're meeting my brother first. Of course, he said. Like the words tasted good. They met at Theo's apartment. Caspian brought homemade dumplings. He admitted his chef had assembled. He talked about bottling plants and labor uprisings and the taste of bad coffee at committee hearings. Theo watched him with doctor's eyes, then said, If you hurt her, I can find all your veins. Caspian smiled with sincerity. That didn't blink. Noted. After dinner, Sloane walked Caspian to his car. He took her hand without needing 2 taps. "What do you want now that no one's looking?" he asked. She considered the question the way she had once considered palettes, deliberately. "I want to build a residency program," she said. "I want to stand in front of a painting I don't understand and decide to love it. I want to cook noodles for breakfast and not apologize for it. I want my mother to be proud of me in a way that makes sense to a ghost and me." He asked, "Gentle you?" She said, "I want unaligned, which is to say I want you because I want you, not because you fix anything." He nodded, as if she'd given him an index card that might save his life. "I can work with that." They kissed like a footnote, clarifying precise. Then they stepped back before the kiss could be asked to do work it hadn't agreed to. 6 months later, the studio erupted. Not in scandal or fire, but in applause. The residency program launched in a former canary with skylights like the eyes of a patient animal. The first cohort included the bus driver, a nurse who carved wood, a man with 6 names who sculpted with recycled fishing nets. Their shows were small miracles that sold slowly and changed strangers quickly. Sloane's divorce equity sold at a number that made her knees go watery when his older told her she donated a chunk to a legal fund for port workers, a choice she made because it kept her honest. She bought a car with all 4 doors the same color. She framed her mother's store bell, not the real one that lived in memory where it worked better, but a replica she had commissioned in iron from an artist who had been a cleaner until a room opened. Rowan sent a postcard from Spokane with a picture of a wheat field. The message, "I'm learning to listen to quiet things." She pinned it to a corkboard, not as a trophy, but as a recording of the weather. Caspian negotiated a new port plan that was uglier and kinder. It moved slower. It paid more. It hosted monthly community dinners where men who'd never been served first found bowls of soup in their hands. He stopped appearing in Sloane's press, except when he bought a painting and insisted the artist's name be bigger than his. One night, months after everything, Sloane and Caspian attended a different gala, not for optics, but because a dancer they both loved was raising money for a hip replacement. The room was smaller, the dresses less armored. At some point a volunteer with a microphone said, "We're so honored to have Sloane Mercer here, whose advocacy made her residency happen in a space that used to smell like fish." And beside her as Sloane took the microphone before the sentence could coil, she looked at Caspian, then at the small crowd that had learned to clap with 2 hands and still use them for work. "This is Caspian Duval," she said. "He's my partner." She let the word land like a bird that had finally found its branch. "He helped fund our program, but more importantly, he stayed when staying was boring." The room cheered because people are built to celebrate endings that feel like beginnings. Caspian leaned in and spoke into the mic, a man who understood stagecraft and still chose to be gentle with it. "I'm here because Sloane asked me to stand next to her and to stop talking when the talking was mine to enjoy and not the room's to endure. He said I will continue to claim her in public. If claiming means I will tell the world I stand beside the decisions she makes for herself." He turned to her, voice low, so only she could hear the ending. "And in private, I claim nothing," he said. I asked. She nodded, the kind of nod that contains an entire vocabulary. Then she kissed his cheek because it felt right. They stood together, not as an alignment, but as a declaration made in LOWERCAC. "We are here. We belong to ourselves. We choose each other anyway." After the program, Arian approached alone. "Nice speech," she said. She looked tired in a way that comes from managing the weather for too long. "Thanks." Sloane said, "I want to apologize." Arian said words slow, like she was learning a new language. "Not for sleeping with him. That was its own disaster for laughing." Sloane considered the apology carefully, like an object put in her hands that might be sharp. "I accept," she said. "I don't forgive yet, but I accept your work." Arian nodded, grateful and not greedy. She left without a parting shot. Progress looks like that. A person walking away uneventfully. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the floor smelled like paper and sweat, Sloane and Caspian stood by the door, shaking hands, accepting thanks, pretending they hadn't made a plan for noodles after you. Okay, he asked I.M. She said it's strange. What is to be claimed, and to feel more free? She said that was the point. He said, for the first time in my life, the point and the optics match. They stepped into the night where the city wore its neon-like jewelry. Sloane tilted her face up to the rain and let herself be a person with a body and a past and a future that didn't require chapter headings. She thought of her mother, of a bell that rings true when a door opens. She thought of Rowan asleep in a quieter place. Furthermore, she thought of Arian walking home without a script. Furthermore, she thought of rooms with keys. Furthermore, she took Caspian's hand. No taps, no audience. A claim that required nothing but the person who made it and the person who allowed it to land. If this story made you hold your breath, if you recognized a piece of yourself in Sloane's terms or Caspian's learning, or in Rowan's stumbling and Arian's late apology, let's keep the conversation going, like this video. If you felt the room shift when Sloane turned humiliation into boundaries, share it with someone who's rebuilding, who needs proof that power can be negotiated without losing your name, and subscribe for more layered cinematic stories about imperfect people trying again. Because we're all carrying two knives trying to make art in a city that moves too fast, and sometimes the only way forward is to write our own terms and invite someone decent to stand beside us. Your support helps us open more rooms, fund more stories, and keep telling the hard truths with heart. Thanks for watching and for staying until the last bell rings.